Hello, this is John Miares from the USDA NASS Great Lakes Regional Field Office in East Lansing, Michigan. In this presentation, we're going to talk about how to fill out the pesticide applications table in Section D of the ARMS Phase 2 Production Practices Report. USDA is responsible for publishing estimates of pesticide use in crop production. NASS collects these data so that issues related to food safety, water quality, and pesticide cancellation can be evaluated. ERS conducts research on the impact of alternative regulations, policies, and practices. ARMS is an opportunity for farmers to tell us how they use chemicals responsibly to maintain a safe and abundant food supply. The data are used to lessen concern relating to marketing and exports to other countries. Data can also supply information on actual usage for the decision-making process for product registration, re-registration, and product alternatives. Chemical costs are a large part of the variable production costs for most crops. Therefore, chemical usage is very important. Similar to the fertilizer section, chemical mixes are described and the application practices are recorded in a table. You want to include all types of pesticides that would be applied to the field, including herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, defoliants, and other pesticides. Fertilizer applications and seed treatments would be excluded. The table and graph included on this slide show the most common pesticides applied to soybean planted acres in 2018, the last time this survey was conducted for soybeans. Herbicides were used most extensively, applied to 99% of planted acres. Insecticides were applied to 16% and fungicides to 15%. Among herbicides, glyphosate isopropylamine salt was the most widely used active ingredient, applied to 47% of planted acres, followed by glyphosate potassium salt to 28% of planted acres. Glyphosate is a broad-spectrum post-emergent herbicide and crop desiccant that is used as a common ingredient in many products. There are over 750 products which contain glyphosate. Products including glyphosate potassium salt include Abundant Edge, Bullseye, Departure, Honcho K6, Mad Dog K6, Refuge, Glystar K+, and Roundup Pro Max with a single X, and Touchdown Total. When collecting the pesticide application information, it is important to obtain the trade name and the formulation for the chemical applied. Much of this information can be found in the respondent booklet, which will show formulations, whether it's liquid or dry, and the type or class of each product, fungicide, herbicide, insecticide, or other. It is important to get the formulation correct in order to get the correct product code recorded. In column 2, we want to record the product code associated with the pesticide applied. Most of these codes can be found in the respondent booklet. Be sure to record each product applied on a separate line. For products in the respondent booklet that are listed more than once, be sure to probe carefully to see how the chemical was used to make sure we are using the correct code. In column 3, we want to record the product form as either liquid or dry. In the respondent booklet, it should typically indicate whether or not the product is in liquid or dry form when purchased, but also the respondent should be able to give you an application rate, which might be, if it's in pounds or ounces per acre, would be indicated as dry, or if it were in gallons, quarts, pints, etc. per acre, that would be a liquid form. In column 4 is where we would indicate that we are applying a tank mix to the field. A tank mix occurs when we have two products applied to a field in a single application. A separate line must be used for each product. In the entry in column 4, be sure to enter the line number of the first product in the mix for all products in the mix. Do not confuse tank mixes with packaged premixes. In this example, we are going to show how to record a tank mix between two products, which we will simply call Product A and Product B. These two chemicals were applied together on the selected field, and we are putting them on line 1 and line 2. In this first example, we are putting 1 pint of product A onto the field on line 1. In column 4, we are indicating that this is part of a tank mix and that line 1 is the first line in that tank mix. On the second line of the table, we are indicating that we applied 1.5 pints per acre of product B to our selected field. To indicate that product A and product B were applied from the same tank mix, we are going to enter a 1 in the cell in column 4 for both line 1, product A, and line 2, product B. If the two products were applied separately and not in a tank mix, then the cells in column 4 can either be left blank or have a dash entered in them. In column 5, we indicate when the product was applied. Our choices are before planting, at planting, after planting, or defoliation prior to harvest. If you are applying two chemicals as part of a tank mix, it is important that the time at which they were applied is consistent between the two chemicals, or else you will get an error. For columns 6 and 7, we want to record the application rate. We can either indicate the amount per acre applied in column 6 or the total amount applied to the selected field in column 7. Do not use both on the same line. It is important to record the per application total and not the total for all applications throughout the season. Separate applications need to be recorded on separate lines. All applications should be recorded to 2 decimal places. If the respondent indicates that the application rate was in parts per million, which is not going to be one of your choices in column 8, please take lots of notes. Also, if the respondent indicates that they applied the chemical as a spot treatment, then notes are going to be necessary to explain the situation as well, so that we do not accidentally indicate that we are over applying a particular chemical to an entire field when in fact we're only applying it to small portions of the field. In column 8, we must report the unit code. This will be either pounds or dry ounces for dry products, or potentially gallons, quarts, pints, or liquid ounces for liquid products. The Pesticide Product Information System, which is linked to our edits, knows the product form of most pesticides. So if the product is a liquid and gets reported in dry ounces, then we know we were going to get an error. It is important then to pay attention to make sure that the unit code used matches the product form. In column 9, on the opposite page, we are to be entering a code to explain how the product was applied. In the interviewer's manual, there are in-depth descriptions of the different application methods. Don't forget that for tank mixes, there should be consistency with all of these values. For example, if we were to say that product A was broadcast without incorporation and product B was a foliar or directed spray, then we would have an error when the data were brought into the computer system. In column 10, we are going to record the acres that were treated with the pesticide. Most of what we are going to see is treatment of the entire field, but there may be some cases where we will do partial field treatments or spot treatments. There are a couple of examples in the interviewer's manual showing the difference between a partial field treatment and a spot treatment. Ultimately, the acres recorded in column 10 cannot be greater than the total acres in the selected field. In column 11, we're going to record the number of times that we applied that particular chemical. We're allowed to use this cell to record repeated applications of the same chemicals or the same tank mixes, provided that everything else on that line is the same as far as the application rate, who did the application, when was it applied, and how was it applied. If there are multiple applications, we only will account for the acres recorded once. In column 12, we want to record who made these applications. If it was the operator, partner, or family member, we can code this with a 1. If it was a custom applicator, somebody who was hired as an outside company to do the application for the farm, you would put a code 2. If there's an employee or somebody else who was hired to apply the chemicals, you would put a 3. On this slide, we can see some examples of how one might record multiple lines on this table. On line 1, there's a single application of Roundup Ultra at a rate of 4 liquid ounces per acre applied after planting. Lines 2 and line 3 show a tank mix, and line 4 shows a standalone application of Aztec 2.1. As you can see, we show the product name, the individual product code from the respondent booklet, product form, whether it's a tank mix or not, when it was applied, how much was applied, the unit of application, which must again agree with the product form. On the opposite page, we're recording how the chemical was applied, and of course on lines 2 and 3, which were the tank mix, they had to be applied the same way, how many acres the chemical was applied to, how many times the chemicals were applied, and who applied them. The respondent booklet may not have a complete list of all of the possible chemicals one might want to apply to the selected field. Question 2 in section D allows us to record information about what was applied in those instances when the chemical name and code is not listed in the respondent booklet. Then, either you can contact the regional field office or have your supervisor contact the regional field office so we can request and obtain a code. Copies of new codes for materials will be posted to the Purdue site. The Purdue site will also contain a copy of the all-inclusive pesticide list, which contains thousands of different chemicals and their codes, which may be able to be searched before contacting the regional field office. On these lines, it is important to record the line number of the pesticide application that we're referring to, what it was used for, and the EPA registration number if that is available, or the name and formulation of the product. For example, here we are saying on line 6 we have an insecticide called Danitol 4EC. We see an EPA number, we know it was liquid when it was purchased, and we know it was bought at Midland Chemical Supply. There are definitely different resources available that can help with the recording of this information. First are the pesticide supplement pages. If there are more than 14 applications of pesticides, then the Biocontrols and Pesticide Supplement form is available to get you more lines that are needed. Don't forget that if there are multiple identical chemical applications of the same pesticide, then those may be able to be grouped together through the use of column 11, which allows you to combine multiple applications of the same biocontrols or pesticide at the same rate covering the same area on one line in the table. This could help you reduce the need for a supplement. Farm records can be especially useful in terms of making sure that all of the chemical applications are accounted for. There are federal and state regulations which require that operators maintain records of chemical use applications for each field. Encourage operators you're working with to use them. Use of these records will speed up the interview. Finally, keep a copy of the respondent book handy. Many of the products listed in the respondent booklet along with their chemical codes. Some respondents may be willing to use the booklet to report the product code, which could make some things faster. There's a few other things to keep in mind. As I noted on the previous slide, there are record-keeping requirements for restricted use pesticides that, if you have the spray records available, will make the recording of the pesticide applications go much smoother. To make sure that things don't get lost, it's a good idea to circle the names of the pesticides found in the respondent booklet that the farmer used in the specified field. When doing so, make sure you leave the respondent booklet attached to the questionnaire or in the envelope provided. Do not put any PII or personally identifiable information on the respondent booklet. Now, importantly, if the field selected has not yet been harvested, be sure to find out what the plans are for pesticide applications that may take place prior to harvest. Here are some more helpful hints that can help with the recording of the information in Section D. First, do not record the spray volume applied to the entire field. Many of the chemicals and pesticides applied are heavily concentrated and are diluted with 100 gallons of water before being sprayed onto the field. If you were to record that you were spraying 100 gallons of a chemical onto a field per acre, that might look like you were scorching the field. Do not record the inclusion of adjuvants, surfactants, or carriers in the spray solution. These are products that are included as additives in the chemical tank mix that allow for minimizing of spray drift and allow for the chemical to more directly get contact with the pests that it is targeting. Do not record liquid fertilizer solutions applied in conjunction with a pesticide. This information needs to be recorded in the fertilizer table even if the liquid fertilizer is applied in the same tank mix as the pesticide. The respondent booklet has a conversion table if the units that the respondent gives you don't seem to match. For example, if you wanted to measure something in tablespoons, 2 tablespoons converts to 1 ounce dry. Finally, please double check that the unit code and the formulation are consistent. Make sure that if something is coded as a liquid, that you are using liquid units and liquid codes. Some of the chemicals that are available with the same product name are very similar to each other, but are marketed as liquids versus dry. So be very, very careful which one and which code you are going to be recording so we don't get those mixed up.